This episode is powered by Podcast Startup, the learning platform for creators with a voice. Podcast Startup covers tech, production, editing, marketing, and more. I know what it feels like to be slowed down by challenges revolving around fear, procrastination, and tech, yet I've recorded and published over 260 podcast episodes, which encompasses this podcast and The Unstarving Musician. To learn more about Podcast Startup, go to morningtempo.com/podcast startup, and to get free podcasting startup tips to your inbox. Again, visit morningtempo.com/podcast startup to learn more and to get your free podcasting startup tips. Let's do this. This is the Morning Tempo Podcast. I am your host, Rabanzo. On this podcast, I have conversations with business owners and the entrepreneurial with the slant toward creativity. It's an opportunity for you to learn with me from people who are finding success in the business world, all intended to make your entrepreneurial journey a little bit easier. Welcome to another episode, my friends. I'm Rabanzo, aka Roberto. It's great to have you here. Great to be in your earbuds or your speakers, however you're listening. Greg Kitzmiller knows almost everything there is about living in Panama as a U.S. expat. He shares everything he knows in his book, To Retire in Panama, Adventures of a Young Retired Couple. We met by way of a WordPress meetup that I run. He was looking for a little help with his WordPress website, and I was the fortuitous recipient of his call for help. Speaking of which, you can get help with your small business or nonprofit website with Design by Morning Tempo. We focus on functionality, security, email, marketing, and e-commerce. We also fix stuff, so if your site is broken in some way or infected with malware, we can help. To learn more and to find out if Morning Tempo is right for your website needs, visit morningtempo.com. In addition to his book, Greg also writes a weekly newsletter that serves as an update vehicle for his book, To Retire in Panama. He is all about helping others who are considering retirement in Panama. I venture to say that his book and newsletter are also very helpful to the digital nomad crowd as younger people are looking into location independence. Living as an expat in Panama myself, I can say that the book is packed full of useful content. If you're already intrigued, find Greg's book and newsletter at 2retireinpanama.com, and that's the number 2, retireinpanama.com. In this conversation, we cover Greg and wife Jen's research and exploration of Panama, the post-publishing challenges of marketing, his plans for paid content related to retiring and living in Panama, and creative motivation to begin work on his second book in a fiction genre. Greg is a super nice guy. I've enjoyed working with him on his website and newsletter. I have also enjoyed getting to know him a little better through this conversation and random meetings about town in the Coronado Beach area of Panama. All right, without further ado, here is me and Greg Kitzmiller. Enjoy. Greg, thanks for joining me for a quick chat today.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And thank you, by the way, for sending me a copy of To Retire in Panama, Adventures of a Young Retired Couple, your latest book. It's your first book, right?
It's my first, yes.
Well, first of all, I just want to say that I should probably start with, first of all, I haven't read it yet, but I was perusing the table of contents, and there's a lot of great stuff in here, more than I'll even mention, but like the ones that I sort of earmarked were the ones that I think are among the most helpful to people, like which deal with, you've got a section called Panama's visa, work permit, and residency options. You talk about your own due diligence with your wife, Jen, before coming here, I assume, and
right.
The home buying process, that's a huge one. And there's a whole lot of other ones, some of which I actually have personal funny stories about, everything from ranging to, buying a car to getting your driver's license and all kinds of things in between. But it feels like you covered everything someone would want to know who was moving here, and you. It looks like you have some chapters devoted to sharing a day in the life, if you will, with you and Jen. When you planned it out, did you meet all of the goals that you had set out for in terms of things that you wanted to share in the book, or have you since gone like, oh, I wish I'd have put that in there?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. Periodically, people walk up to me in restaurants and say, hey, you're the guy that wrote that book. And And we've developed a lot of great friendships with people who read the book and came here, and several have actually moved here. One guy a few weeks ago came up to me and said, your book didn't have anything in there about bringing your pets.
Oh, that is a good one.
And because that wasn't my personal experience, so I didn't put it in. His name is Patrick, and he and his wife got the book in, about this time last year, and actually used it for a moving guide, and they moved in June. And he has a funny story about bringing pets. And I said, Patrick, if I do an update to the book, I'm going to need you to help me with that chapter. And so he's more than willing, and that will be an important chapter in the update for sure.
Oh yeah, and Sammy, my wife, and I have our own experiences with that too. They're funny in my head in retrospect, but they're mostly just kind of traumatic, and most of that is honestly self-imposed. Just stressing over the situation, and we actually find ourselves about to do it again. I think you probably know, and we may have already spoken about this, but Sammy and I are planning a move to Querétaro, Mexico, and now we're towing 2 pets instead of just one, so it'll be an adventure for sure.
Right. Yeah. His story was more about their pets are all rescues, and it was more about the financial, because they ended up losing one of their pets prior to the move, and so the documents all said 5, and they only had 4 to check in, and immigration said, no, you can't do this with 4 pets. It says here you have 5. So yeah, wow. That was very traumatic.
Yeah, and that's a lot of animals, and yeah, I'm sort of picturing, just based on my my personal experiences in Panama, especially getting here the first time, trying to explain and reason with immigration that over what happened, and I'm sure it was just an oversight on his part, something that never occurred to him would be an issue, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a great idea. I'm glad that I'm not surprised that you had that feedback, even though I didn't think of it in looking through this. I'm like, wow, he's really covered everything. And here I was, we brought a cat, and I didn't even think of that.
The other thing that's worth mentioning, you alluded to it in the beginning, was the visa process. And again, everything, as soon as you write it, everything gets outdated, especially in Panama. Things change so quickly. The visa process, while what Jen and I did hasn't changed, but the Friendly Nations visa has changed. So there's a little bit of outdated information there that we certainly would like to get updated. But one of the things that I try to do is I put out a weekly newsletter, and when things like this happen, we report it in the newsletter so that people can be aware of, rapidly changing things. COVID makes things change,
Yeah, for sure. And I know, because you and I have spent a little time talking about your newsletter and the kind of the publication of the newsletter and your website and things, that you have a nice archive. You're keeping an archive of those, which serves as good as a blog post, in my opinion, so people can see things, even if they missed a particular topic in a newsletter issue that was released before they signed up for your newsletter, they would still be able to find it, right?
Right. The old archives are still there. That I changed my platform for the newsletter to something that's much better and more user friendly for everybody. Three or 4 months ago, and I wasn't able to continue to put the newsletter on the blog, but I do have them all on Pinterest. So there's a link on the newsletter to click on Pinterest, and anybody that wants to see the archives, they're all on a Pinterest feed titled, to Retire in Panama newsletter. So cool. It's easy to go back and read them. I've had people tell me, I discovered your blog and went back and read all the blogs and all the newsletters, and just very appreciative. We get a lot of emails and stuff every week. So I know that we're helping people, and that's what I set out to do. And we like it when we hear from people that have had a happy experience.
Yeah, yeah. And for people, let me mention it now, lest I forget, the website is to retireinpanama.com, and that's the number 2, to retireinpanama.com, where you can find all of the social media links and some of the archives and other stuff, basically all the work that Greg has done on the book. So I'll have a link for that in the show notes too, for people that are driving or whatever when you hear this.
Yeah, right. In the book and the newsletter was born from the blog. So the blog goes back to the very beginning. I mean, it starts when we started researching our retirement and our move. So, a little bit goes into that. A little bit is in there about some of the time we spent in the country before we made the move and before we made the decision, because that's important. I mean, I think it's important for people to experience the country, whether it's Panama or Mexico or Costa Rica or wherever they decide to expat. I think it's important to go there and spend some time on the ground. Make sure it's what you want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. How much time did you and Jen spend here before you moved here?
We vacationed once with it already in our mind, and when we were on vacation, we hired a tour guide that took us to Coronado, which is where we live, and helped us secure a rental. And then we came back to the rental for 9 weeks. We liked Coronado because it's kind of central to the country. And during that 9 weeks, we just took every week, we took a trip. We went to Boquete. We went to the Azarian Peninsula. We went into the mountains. We just checked out as much of the country as we could in 9 weeks, because we felt like if we were going to do this, we wanted to know where we would rather live. So I call it due diligence. I know people that come here and they love it. They're on vacation. They love it. They buy a condo, and then they discover that it's really not where they wanted to be. But maybe 100 miles up the road would be a whole different experience. So, I just say explore and discover. Rent for a while first before you buy something.
Those are pieces of advice I try to give to people, especially the one about spending time here. We were only here 2 weeks, and we had a very detailed spreadsheet, like decision matrix with all this criteria, and we chose to live in El Valle de Antón, which is a beautiful place, as you know. But in spite of all of our efforts to think ahead and check all the right boxes, we moved to a place that after about 8 months, my wife was going crazy from all the rain.
Right. Yeah, weather is. There's a chapter in the book about the weather, and I allude to it in a couple of places about when we're talking about due diligence. It's not a very big country, but there's a lot of different weather here, and if you don't like rain, you might choose to live in an area like Coronado that kind of has a much less rain than the rest of the country.
Right.
For some weird reason, it just it goes by us. But same thing with the heat. It tends to be hotter and more humid when you get by the water than it is in the mountains. But if you go to the mountains, you're going to probably have a lot more rain.
Yep. Yeah, and we both met. I'm sure you have as well, but we both met people that really prefer the cool climate of El Valle. The rain's not a big deal, or the rain is a big deal, and they prefer to have a little more heat, with less rain. So I think you did it right. You all this due diligence and exploration that you did. Is there anything that, when you look back on that, did you leave anything off, or do you have even with all that time that you and Jen spent here, are there things that you tell people that you know now that you didn't know then that would help them in their due diligence?
Not really a lot, because I think I maybe it's just me, but I think we did the due diligence that we needed to do, and it's hard to come up with any bad experiences because we checked it out before. I always tell people to rent for a year because you need to see all the seasons.
Yeah.
Even when it doesn't rain, the wind blows. We're in an 11th floor condo, and when the wind blows in the windy season, it can blow stuff off the walls and the doors slam closed. So you have to learn how to deal with that. And then, those aren't like earth-shattering things, but
some people find that annoying.
and if they don't expect it, it's crazy.
Yeah, totally. So switching gears a little bit here, what has been the most interesting challenge post-publishing the book with regards to the book itself? What's been the most interesting challenge since you published it?
With regard to the book, the most challenging aspect is probably marketing. I mean, I self-published it, and so I don't have any publisher there putting it on the shelves in Barnes and Noble or anything like that. So getting the word out, getting good reviews helps other people find it. And for me, it's not about money, because you don't get rich writing a book. You probably can relate, I'm sure. But, we just the last few weeks, I went with two other authors to I call it the Barnes and Noble of Panama. It's a new bookstore, Alambre something or other. And we presented our books to them, and there was a process for getting it on their shelves. So all three of us have been approved for having our books on the shelves in this new bookstore, and they have 14 of them. They're like coffee, cafes, shops, really cool little bookstores. So we're excited about that, but we have to provide the books. So we've got them come. All three of us have them coming, and then we'll get them in all the stores, and that's going to be huge for us, I think. I don't know. And then, we do some book signings and things when we can, but it's, COVID probably is the most difficult thing, and working within the guidelines of the restrictions in the country and still be able to do, those kinds of things. So
the bookstore, for those who are interested, and I'll put a link in the show notes, is El Hombre de la Mancha. I guess this makes me think of Don Quixote de la Mancha, but they have a cool location here in the Coronado area. I think last you told me they don't have their cafe, as in coffee, going yet. Is that still the case?
They don't. I hope they put coffee in there, because their store in the city, and there may be more than one in the city, but where we went to make the pitch is their main headquarters in the city, and the coffee there is outstanding. I'm a lover of good coffee, and I was very impressed with their cafe and the bookstore. I mean, the bookstore was very cool. They don't have a lot of English books, but the organization is very, very concerned with literacy and getting good books to people in the country. So I'm impressed with the organization, and I'm excited to be able to get my book there.
Yeah, that's exciting. You have alluded to this, that the goal was really to share information and help others. Have any new goals or aspirations evolved since you first published the book?
Well, one of the things that came up, it was last July when we launched the book, not this past, but last July when we launched the book. And of course, that was the height of the whole COVID thing going on. And so we did it virtually on Facebook. And one of the first questions that came from somebody in the launch was, are you going to write anything else? Or, have you thought about writing fiction? And of course, other people have been needling me to write some other stuff. And so I actually have a fiction book in the works. It's a murder mystery, and I'm about 30% through the rough draft, and I have a couple people reading the rough draft as I write, and they're excited. So I'm kind of, at first I wasn't too sure about it. It's, you doubt yourself. And and I was afraid that my murder mystery was going to sound like every other one, or be a repeat of a TV show I watched 20 years ago. But it's coming out pretty good, and I think I'm gonna have some tie back to Panama, but mostly it happens in the United States. And
I like it. Well, what's on the horizon of the marketing or spreading the word about the book? I know things are sort of, as having done just one book myself, there's so much to learn, and I actually follow, or I shouldn't say follow, I'm in a bi-weekly mastermind, if you will, with another writer, and she's published her second. And anyway, the point is that there's always new things to learn especially when you're self-published, because you're trying to do everything. But do you have some new things on the horizon with regards to getting your book out there?
My newsletter is free, and I think that that I'm going to. My intent, and I don't know how it's going to work out, is to put some paid content in the newsletter to further help people and get some local Panamanian people that are very knowledgeable about, say, buying a car or buying a house, or the immigration process. I hope to have an immigration attorney do a Zoom with people that are interested, and give them the fine details of what they need for immigration. Same thing with buying a house or buying a condo or a car. Buying a car is tricky, as you know, and so is buying real estate. It can be overwhelming, especially when you don't speak the language and the contracts come and they're all in Spanish, and you have to have everything translated. So having a knowledgeable, helpful person that knows how to do those things, it becomes important. And so I'm thinking that just taking the book one step further and giving people some content to help them, with the hard questions.
I like that. It's a great idea. And with regard to the fact that you're working on a fiction book, a second book, a murder mystery, what drove you to do that? Having written this very helpful nonfiction book, what was the motivator and confidence creator for that?
Well, it was funny because people that read the newsletter will already know this, but I do a monthly writers workshop here in Coronado, and that group was needling me to do something. And a couple of months ago, in one of the workshops, we write on prompts, and so the facilitator will give us a prompt, and we can either write from that prompt or we can write something else. Sometimes I just write newsletter articles, depends. She gave us a prompt, and it just, I don't know, it was, I can't remember exactly what it was, but something just didn't smell right, and my thing that didn't smell right was a dead body. And so I started writing from there. Somebody else wrote the smells of holiday, Christmas, the food, and everybody in the group wrote something about a different smell. And there I was with a dead body. And we write for 12 minutes, and then we share our work, and everybody kind of tells you what works and stuff. And they were all just I got to the end of my 12 minutes and they were all just flipping out. You can't stop there. You have to write some more. You have to write some more. So in that day, we wrote 3 prompts, and I wrote them all. I continued writing that, and they all agreed that it was a good start, and I needed to continue it. So I thought about it for a couple of weeks, and then I just sat down one day and I started writing, and I didn't know. I mean, I didn't have an outline. I just started making it up as I went along, and it actually started turning out pretty good. And I've been working on developing the characters and developing the plot, and I think it's gonna be good. I don't know. It's hard to say.
That's fantastic. And I will see you at that writer's workshop later this week. I haven't been in a while, but is it? Yeah, tomorrow. I'll see you in the morning. That's great. Well, Greg, thank you so much for spending time with me to talk about your book and these other things that are going on. And it's been a real pleasure, man.
It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Please help other creative entrepreneurial types find this podcast by following it on your favorite audio service. If you like what I do on this podcast and would like to help me do more with the podcast, please sign up for the Morning Tempo Insiders community newsletter. You can do so by visiting morningtempo.com. It's free. The newsletter and occasional email from me is filled with tips and insights for your creative entrepreneurial journey. It's based on experience, expertise, and knowledge of my podcast guests, various other marketing and sales pros that I follow, and personal research that I do for business. And you'll get details on the latest episodes of the podcast. And if you really like what I'm doing here, visit morningtempo.com/crowd sponsor for more information about producer and sponsorship opportunities. All right, I am out. Thank you so much for listening. Ciao for now.